Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar today on the Skills First contract, specifically looking at the pre-training review and enrolment processes. So today's webinar is designed to focus on your organization's ability to move your pre-training review and enrolment processes to a purely electronic and online process, whilst complying with the contractual obligations of Skills First. So we decided to run this particular topic just purely because of the sheer volume of organisations that were seeking assistance on building online solutions in the wake of COVID-19. A lot of you are naturally concerned about contractual obligations with respect to online procedures, and what we would like to do today is provide you with enough confidence to walk away from today's session and be able to go back to your organisation and build a plan for implementing online PTR and enrolment procedures if you haven't already started that. It's also a fantastic opportunity to start utilising technology and web-based solutions that you perhaps haven't implemented prior to COVID-19 in your organisation. And it's certainly going to give you the ability to create some operational efficiencies in your business, which you'll no doubt reap the benefits of down the track. So before we get started, just a quick disclaimer: we're obviously not the Department of Education, and you should consider all the facts and obviously reference the contract and supporting documentation before making any decisions regarding business process changes. And then should you have any questions or grey areas of the contract that you would like addressed, you should take full advantage of the SUTS inquiries line to clarify any of that with the department directly. So this short webinar is going to focus on 5 key areas of enrolment, those being the pre-training review, the determination of eligibility, so moving that eligibility form to an electronic form, evidence of concession, statement of fees and training plans, and of course the enrolment form itself. So starting with the pre-training review, there is a couple of different options for organisations here. Some organisations will actually collect electronic forms and ask students to complete questionnaires or surveys. They'll then submit that information via an email or post, and then the RTO delegate will review that information to make a decision on suitability. Another couple of options are to conduct phone calls or even conduct a virtual pre-training review. Whatever you decide to do, you must make sure that you've got a clear and documented business process. So if you are going to change your enrolment procedures, they need to be reflected in your policy documentation. Evidence of suitability, as I mentioned, can be collected through online forms or questionnaires, whether they're sent via email or post. But our preference would be, where possible, to conduct discussions through a phone call or a web-based software products such as Zoom or Google Hangouts or Skype, for example. The benefit of some of those software programs is that it allows you to share your screen and share documentation. It gives you the opportunity to engage face-to-face with somebody, albeit virtual. And they also allow you quite often to record those sessions. So if you wanted to record the PTR discussion and retain that as evidence, provided you had student permission to record that session, I think that would be a fantastic way of retaining evidence of that PTR process. So just talking about LLN and digital capabilities as well as part of PTR. So the contract doesn't mandate a formal LLN test be conducted. It just asks to test or gauge for capabilities. And it doesn't also prescribe any specific LLN assessment tools. Capabilities can be tested using web-based programs such as LLN Robot, which can be sent out as a link through an email. The software would then spit out a report mapped to the ACSF guidelines or framework, I should say. So there's plenty of options there to conduct a remote LLN test. You can also even just send out a PDF that's a fillable PDF form as well if you wanted to via email. For online delivery, you must also consider the digital capabilities of the student. And it's really important that you capture or start that conversation with the student during the PTR process. And you need to make sure that they've got access to the necessary technologies. It would be unfair to expect a student to log into a student portal to access critical resources or complete assessments if they don't have access to internet or a computer, or if your online processes require them to have specific programs installed on their computer or specific computer hardware requirements. These are all the things that need to be captured during the pre-training review process. And then you need to document the outcome of that PTR process, obviously. So you need to document why the enrolment is suitable and why the training option that's been determined is appropriate for the eligible individual. And again, that information can be captured electronically through a PDF form or through some other electronic process. So looking at the determination of eligibility, which is a big one for organisations. If you look at the guidelines about determining student eligibility, clause 2.14 talks about the online or requirements for electronic completion of an eligibility form. Okay, and it basically says that that information needs to be collected in exactly the same way as it would be had you used a hard copy form. Okay, so the easiest win here is just to take that form, which is outlined in the guidelines doc, and just convert it as you see it into an electronic form, if possible. You do need to have digital endorsement, and that digital endorsement obviously needs to be by the student and also by the RTO delegate as well. Evidence can be retained in electronic format. So if you are completing an electronic form and you are retaining that electronic form as evidence and not printing it out, that's fine as well. So there's no need to go and then print out that electronic form if you've got some kind of PDF version of it sitting in your system. So interactive PDFs would be the other way that you could achieve electronic completion of an eligibility form if you didn't necessarily have a web form that was being completed. Just separating myth from fact for a moment. This is a question we get asked a lot about the eligibility form. It can 100% be completed electronically and still comply with the contract. The guidelines document clause 2.14 mentions that, and it can be completely completed and stored electronically. Okay, so that's just reviewing that information we just discussed. The citing and retaining of evidence can be in the form, as you know, of an original citing. So you take that original document and make a photocopy of it. In an electronic situation, that's not possible. So if you have a virtual pre-training review session and the student pulls out a Medicare card through, say, Zoom, and they show you that Medicare card on the screen, that will not suffice for the purposes of determination of eligibility. Certified copies is a rarer situation where students actually go down to their local chemist or police station and they get a photocopy of their ID certified, and then they post that certified copy into the organisation. That would obviously require you to retain that photocopy physically on file, and probably isn't the most efficient process for moving towards an streamlined online process. Document verification service is a fantastic option if you want to take this online. The DVS provider verifies the documentation rather than having to cite the original and keep printed copies. In order to achieve that, you will need to engage the services of a registered gateway service provider, and we'll talk about that on the next slide. So the DVS is a national online system that allows training providers to validate a student's ID. You can achieve this first by engaging a service provider, a gateway service provider. These organisations are authorised to direct information match requests to and from the Commonwealth Government's DVS. Okay, so those services come at a cost. You'll need to ring around and get some quotes and talk to the gateway service providers directly. Roughly, you're looking at perhaps $1 to $1.50 per check, plus some administration fees, whether that's a monthly service fee or similar. But in the scheme of things, it could be a great investment in streamlining some of these processes. So it works for identification documents that verify eligibility, proof of age, and it also works on concession. We just want to make a note there that some gateway service providers don't verify concession cards. So if it is your intention to adopt this process for the purposes of determination of eligibility and concession, then we recommend you specifically ask that question when talking to a prospective gateway service provider, because the last thing you want to do is implement a process like this only to find that you can't actually verify the concession cards. So using DVS as part of your verification process or your online enrolment process means that you have a paperless procedure. So you contractually are not obligated to print out readings from those DVS services. You just need to retain the online transaction record. So that is something that you can download as a screenshot or a PDF perhaps. When completing the eligibility form, you'll need to tick the applicable boxes to demonstrate that you've used a DVS process for ID verification. And the gateway service provider will provide your organisation with the administrative platform. So you'll log into that gateway service provider's platform, and that's where you'll input the information required to verify that documentation. As far as we're concerned, it's the most efficient and secure process if you're looking at taking this process online. It does require a well-established online enrolment process, so we recommend that organisations looking to implement a DVS into their processes consider what their organisations and cohorts digital capabilities are for completing such a process. Okay, so there's a lot of other considerations that you would have to make here, which would be specific to your organisation. So talking about evidence of concession for a moment. Okay, so, and this is not going to necessarily affect everyone, just those who are perhaps charging tuition fees. If you look at the 2020 guidelines about fees, supplementary document, clause 3.10, your original hard copies or digital concessions must be presented in person. Therefore, they cannot be cited remotely. So just as I mentioned before with the determination of eligibility documentation, so if you were going to run a virtual session, a student showing you a document on the screen is not going to suffice. Certified copies of concessions are not acceptable. The Centrelink confirmation e-services for businesses. This is a process where you retain an extract from the online service, which displays the date that you made that extract, the concession reference number, and the name of the concession holder. Okay, so this would be one option. As I mentioned before, some DVS service or some gateway service providers will allow you to verify evidence of concession. So you could use exactly the same process for collecting this information if you wish. And again, just a note there to say that there's no printouts required. So at no point have we printed a single piece of paper throughout this process. Okay, so we'll just talk about statement of fees and training plans for a minute. So the statement of fees and the training plan may be provided electronically, and some of you may already be doing that. An electronic version of these documents must include the same information as it would on a hard copy document. So again, it's just a matter of replicating what you're already doing on that paper-based statement of fees and putting that into an electronic copy, whether it's a PDF that you email out or some kind of other interactive form. The statement of fees, the electronic record that's created must confirm that the statement of fees has been generated for each eligible individual. So it needs to be in an auditable format, which means you would probably want to have some process for documenting how you sent out that statement of fees and also where you store it for audit purposes. Okay, so a lot of student management systems will have the ability to send those documents out automatically, and they will timestamp a record against the student file, indicating that that statement of fees has been emailed from your student management system. In terms of training plans, they can be digitally endorsed by all parties if applicable. So we've seen some changes to the training plan requirements in 2020. I guess the question that you have to ask is what constitutes an electronic action. The Department of Education did release a fact sheet not so long ago on electronic signatures, and we have done a separate blog on electronic signatures for skills first providers if you wish to read that. So the audit logs within your student management system may be able to demonstrate that your training plan was emailed. You can also implement electronic training plans that have interactive PDFs, for example, using Adobe Document Cloud or HelloSign or other software providers like that that can send out the training plan and retrieve a signature. And those signatures will be tracked with an audit log or an audit report at the end of that document as well. So just to summarize on the statement of fees and training plans in particular, the training plans can go out from your student management system. You can use a service provider like HelloSign or Adobe to send them out with interactive signature fields, and then you can collect that information with an audit log and store it against the student file electronically. And then the enrolment form, most student management systems these days will come with an option where you can complete web-based enrollments, whether that's inbuilt or whether that's something you can achieve using APIs. Most vendors these days will offer that assistance. When building your online enrolment form, you want to make sure that you are collecting mandatory standard enrolment questions. Make sure that you've included all of the relevant privacy notices on that form as well. So treating it exactly as you would a paper-based form. Making sure there's any additional requirements such as the eligibility checks or the ID document uploads that we were talking about earlier. Make sure all of that is embedded into your online process. You also would be wise to have a process where the student wasn't technically enrolling until they had successfully navigated their way through a pre-training review process. So the last thing you want to do is start collecting online enrollments and eligibility declarations and confirmation of enrollment prior to conducting a PTR. And the electronic confirmation that is obtained needs to ensure that the details provided are correct, that the student has acknowledged the privacy notices as well. And digital endorsement, again, needs to come from the various stakeholders that might be signing that document. So the student, the guardian, the employer, if it's a traineeship or apprenticeship, and the RTO delegate as well. I mentioned electronic signatures briefly, so look at that fact sheet that was released on SVTS, that was released not so long ago. Electronic actions must satisfy the principles of identity, which is being able to identify the student as signing the document. It needs to be able to satisfy the principle of consent. So that's the person completing the form is clearly agreeing to the terms of the form. So laying out those terms with a checklist, maybe some checkboxes and a signature right underneath it would be a good way of demonstrating consent. And then obviously reliability as well. So the electronic action needs to be reliable. You can use software that tracks IP addresses, and I mentioned them before, and it also provides an audit log. So Adobe Sign or HelloSign are some good examples of how you could achieve that as well. So your next steps towards implementing an online PTR and enrolment process. So make sure you choose the online solutions that suit your needs, your business's needs, your services and your cohorts. And I think that's really important, that last one. There's plenty of organizations out there who have cohorts that may not be confident navigating this type of process. And you may need to consider what services you offer or what support you offer to guide them through such a process. Utilize your existing IT solutions. Consider your limitations before purchasing any new online systems as well. So the good example is signing up for a gateway service provider only to find out that you can't actually verify concession. So making sure you do a lot of research before you sign up to some of these service providers. And set up integrations that promote workflows and reduce the administrative burden. So now that you have an online process, there's a fantastic opportunity to conduct some more automation, whether it's automatically sending out an enrollment confirmation letter once the student enrolls, automatically issuing invoices, etc. There's some fantastic workflow automation that you can achieve through this type of process. And then, of course, make sure you update all of your relevant business policies and procedures as well. So that goes back to the comment I made at the beginning of the webinar. Make sure what you do in practice is being supported by your policies and procedures. And of course, make sure your staff are well trained and well supported in using these web-based tools and apps, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that are going to be providing the end user support when a student rings up and says, I've got problems with the online enrollment form. So goodbye paper processes, I hope. Hopefully this webinar has given you some greater confidence, so you can go away and have a think about how you could implement such a process in your business. If it's something that you would like to discuss with us, feel free to get in touch. We do have some instructions on how you can book in a free consultation session if you want to talk to us about it. Otherwise, good luck with the current situation that we face, and we hope you enjoyed that webinar. Thank you.